Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about film, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Elijah Fleming.
I'm Christy Vogler.
And I'm Colin McCormick.
And today we're uncovering, once again, the HBO BBC historical drama, Rome. Colin, you've said before that you don't dig season 2 as much as season 1. Is that still your feeling?
Yes. I dig season 2 a lot less for reasons that I can get into in a moment, but mostly because I think that season 2 kind of loses the ball a little bit. And there's a lot of parts that feel a little superfluous and a little directionless, whereas season 1, everything kind of moves towards a single point in space and time at the very end. Season 2, I think, has a lot of threads that I'm like, where it feels like later, George R. R. Martin, Game of Thrones, kind of like, where is this all going? Like, how is it going to get resolved? But yeah, less. I mean, I like parts of it. It's not like complete bad, but in general, I dig it less than I do season 1, although some of that is not the show's fault.
And Christy, this was your first time in season 2.
Yeah. So I didn't understand necessarily the reasons they got canceled, but I researched that a little bit, just saying that like they found out during pre-production of season 2, and I still immensely enjoyed it, but I am so tired after having watched it. And it makes sense because what I learned is like, okay, they're at the very beginning of season 2, and they're like, so what was going to be 5 seasons is now 2 seasons, and we have literally 1 season to squish in 4 seasons worth of plot lines. And I feel that for sure. And then to Colin's point about like, there seems to be a lot of threads. For me, the feeling was, you know what the solution is? Just kill everyone. Because fun fact about ancient history, everyone dies. So,
Sure.
But I still enjoyed it. Yeah. I'm just like, I literally had to pull up the descriptions. This was last episodes for the season. And just so much happens for some of these individual characters of like ups, down, evil, not evil anymore.
Yeah. I mean, Varanus alone goes through like 4 different arcs very wildly. And what I read was the original plan was that season 2 was going to be up until the death of Brutus, which in this season happens, I want to say, in like episode 5 or something like that.
Well, is it 6 is Philippi, right? So
yeah,
it would be 6.
About episode 6, so about 2/3 of the way through. And then the sort of plan 3 and 4 were going to be sort of Egypt, and then season 5 Judea and Palestine, which struck me as interesting, and we can come back to that.
That was my thought. It felt like it was really setting up for Judea.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on this as well, but the first season inside season 2, right? Like everything up until Philippi. So,
which feels like it could be its own little, like it feels like its own season, and it is weird that it keeps going. And I do wish that they had just been able to draw out that, because the first 6 episodes I think are my favorite, and it does feel like there is that momentum that you were talking about. It's like we're going towards something, and there's all of this tension between Adia and Sevilla, and then Philippi is the big next thing, right? So we have the death of Caesar, we have Philippi. In my head, it was like, next season is Actium, right? And no.
Yeah. And in my memory, I thought there was a lot more Cleopatra in Egypt in this season than there actually was. She doesn't come into the season until, she has a cameo kind of in the first half, but she doesn't really become center to it until the last like 2 episodes, maybe.
So before we get too far, because so much is going on in this season, but do you guys have a TLDW for the season? We literally leave end of season 1. This is the start of season 2. We're covering a lot of time period. And like mine is literally, no one really ages.
Octavian, who ages laterally. Or diagonally, maybe.
And it's Mr. Bingley. Like that was killing me so much.
I know. Well, see, I had seen Rome before I saw Pride and Prejudice, so I was like, it's Octavian, which is a weirder direction to go.
I think that is a weirder direction to go, frankly.
Yeah.
So yeah, TLDR, to kind of what we were just talking about, my TLDR is 4 seasons worth of history, 1 season of television.
Yeah.
What does Verena say? He's like, I caused the death of my wife. I caused the death of my children. I caused the death of Caesar. What should I do now?
Yep.
That's pretty good. Oh, that's great, actually.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. There's nothing we could say right now to like fully encompass everything that happened in this season.
So we pick up exactly where we left off. Caesar is lying dead on the Senate floor, and everybody is standing, and all the conspirators are cheering and patting themselves on the back for a job well done. And Mark Antony, which I really like, Mark Antony just cannot be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
He just blasts through Quintus Pompey and makes his way to safety. And everybody is deciding over what to do. And the sort of twist that comes out of Caesar's will is one, that Pasca's free, and two, that Octavian has been named his sole heir. And we start to get the kind of beginnings of the rife between Antony and Octavian, who I guess never really had a great relationship.
No. I mean, it's the guy sleeping with your mom.
Yeah, it's very awkward.
Yeah.
But I think like Octavian is clearly also setting himself up in the first episode as like the mastermind, right? Like he's the one who like pulls out all the strings, and he's like, well, are we following the law? And which leads to like, I think one of my favorite scenes when Mark Antony goes to talk to Cicero and Brutus and Cassius. And he's like, well, did we kill a tyrant, or are we still all, consuls and stuff? Because that's the big mistake that they make, right? They kind of had everything that they wanted after they killed Caesar, and if they just didn't listen to Mark Antony, they probably would have been fine.
Yeah. I also liked the little comment he made. It's like, what is the solution? It's like, it's just as if he was struck by lightning, which I learned thanks to Partial Historian's book, Rex, that like that is supposedly something that actually happened to one of the early Roman kings. He was there one day, lightning struck, and then he was gone. And we move on to the next person. So I liked that little Easter egg.
The trick or the realization that Octavian makes is that, well, if Caesar was a tyrant, that means all of the things he did as a tyrant are illegal and become null and void. But that includes a bunch of appointments, including things that the conspirators got, like the political appointments that Brutus and Cassius got. And so, unwilling or unable to part with their kind of boons, they settle on a truce with Mark Antony to sort of, we bury the man, mourn the man, bury the tyrant, something like that.
I think so.
Yeah, like kill the tyrant and mourn the man. Something along those lines.
Yeah. And so that's happening in the Senate. And then meanwhile, Varenus has caused the death of his wife and curses his children, who get kidnapped by a gangster that he had prior dealings with. I don't know. Where do we want to start with the patricians, or do we want to start with the plebeians?
Plebes.
Yeah. I will say that one thing I really loved about this very first episode that was so beautifully done was the juxtaposition of Caesar's funeral with Niobe's funeral, because that opens up with it excellently of like, what do the elites get versus, what do the plebes get for a funeral? And I thought both were really beautiful in a way. So
I like the touch with the mask. Patrician families and noble families in Rome would keep funerary masks of their ancestors, and they have this whole creepy death wall of all of your forefathers staring at you and reminding you. And so we see that at the funeral. We basically have all the like masks behind Caesar by his coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Varenus, I feel like a lot of my complaints that I had at the beginning about why I don't dig this one less, a lot of them come back to Varenus, who is really all over the map, where he kind of goes full crazy. I don't know what to say about that.
I feel like he follows his own, I guess, trajectory like to its natural end, right? Which is, well, everything has gone so terribly that he was all about the rules and the discipline, and now he's like, well, I guess none of that worked. Mm-hmm. Everything is still awful, and like the worst has happened. So I feel like he's gone the complete opposite, where he's like, all the rules and smashes God statues and just,
Concord.
Yeah.
He kills the gangster Orestes
Pullman, yes. That scene is spectacular, though, where they're like walking back down the street covered in blood, carrying his head. Iconic. I love it.
Which he proceeds to then keep for like a month in his stupor, until by the end, I made a note when Mark Antony visits him in the next episode and holds up the head, it looks like a Frankenstein head you get at Spirit Halloween. So yeah, and then he decides basically he's going to head up, he's going to take over Orestes' Collegium, which is like a union / mob / guild for the Aventine, basically. And the main job they do is they dole out, as we see in the episode, they dole out grain, but also all sorts of crime things.
It did feel a little Sopranos there for a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, it gets very Gangs of New York, especially by the end, where you have like the sort of inner city gang turf wars playing out. But then the thing is also like, this keeps getting punctuated by things like Varinus leaves and he goes off and he joins Mark Anthony's army, and then he comes back to it, and then he leaves, and they go like, they keep transitioning to different stages of life in this season in a way that gives me narrative whiplash. But
yeah, I mean, it feels like the plan was to drag it out, and I assume maybe that this season was supposed to be like the Gangs of New York on the Aventine season. And that like his ending arc this season might have been rescuing his children finally. But yeah, just the fact that we've like, oh, we already have the kids back. Oh, we're already going off to Gaul or wherever. Yeah, it's like we're trying to smash his entire 3-4 season arc of good, bad in 3 episodes now. Yeah.
And similarly, like, because you end up with like, the show almost feels like it sort of creates conflict. Pullo, for example, where like, I mean, because of course, like in a show like this, like nobody can just be happy. And like Pullo was well set up at the end of season 1, where he is basically running off with Irene to marry her, and then he gets dragged back and stuff happens to him. And he basically spends a lot of the episode kind of looking after Varinus, basically playing second to Varinus.
Which he's okay with too.
I kind of liked that it was almost like the inverse of season 1. I feel like Varinus has to take care of Pullo so much in season 1, and their fortunes are kind of flipped in season 2. And I like that aspect. I just wish it hadn't been so rushed. There's so much of season 2 that I feel like I really love. And again, like on a rewatch, I was like, man, really enjoy this. Just it's toward the end that it really feels way too rushed.
Yeah. And we also get the introduction of a new character where we get Gaia, played by Zuleika Robinson.
Unnecessary. I don't know. I mean, I guess she causes conflict, but like, I don't know.
All right, so this is my point. It's like conflict that feels contrived in some way, where in season 1, all the stuff with Niobe and the infidelity and all that stuff eventually pays out in the very last season, where you end up, that rumor winds its way into Varinus's ears, drags Varinus away from Caesar, allows Caesar gets murdered, which I think is great. It justifies the existence of that narrative, where Gaia basically seems to exist to create conflicts for the characters, namely in poisoning and killing Irene. Basically, it seems like just to kill that character and create drama.
Yeah.
Like, it feels kind of soap opera-y.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I will say, like, my thought on that, which is the kind of theme I've seen throughout both seasons, is that Irene herself had been a slave, and then she'd been freed under very bad circumstances, and now she's the domina of the tavern / whatever. And she's now has no sympathy for Gaia as a slave. Partly because like Gaia's not listening to her. And to me, it's a really, that's the interesting thing about power. Even at the smallest levels, Irene does have her independence. She now, through her marriage to Pullo, has some authority within the household, but someone's not respecting that authority. So she tells Pullo, hey, she's not listening to me. You need to go beat her, without recognizing it's like she was in the exact same position for a good chunk of her life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of like that, because I think that's how institutions of oppression operate, right? Where like the minute you get out, you just turn it right around. We talked a little bit about this, I think, with Spartacus, where the gladiator trainers and the guys who perpetuate gladiatordom are former gladiators.
Right.
And, I think that in the kind of thing where like nobody like questions that slavery exists, or that you would beat your slaves when they don't listen to you or something like that. And like, it's taken as a granted sort of in this.
Well, and I think that's just the point of like season 2, and like why this extreme social divide that exists, that's based on patriarchy, is like, it's just violent, and everyone perpetuates it. Even those who had been, at the lowest levels, if they gain any kind of power. I will say I love Pasca.
Pasca.
Pasca. I'm like,
Pasca's great.
Him and Jocasta were relationship goals. Yeah, I thought he was such an intelligent character the whole time, but then he ends up just being kind of like high in Egypt, and then he sees the writing on the wall, and he's like, well, we're out of here. We're going to be penniless again, but...
I mean, this is, I think, kind of also the problem that you like put her finger on a second ago, which is like, what do I do now? Right?
Yeah.
And like, Pasca had a very clear job with Caesar, and now like, what do you do with Pasca now after this? And he just kind of hangs around, for lack of a better word. There's characters that are like in the show and were in the show and brought in the show for reasons, and now kind of they have nothing to do. So yeah, Pasca marries Octavia's friend, and we see very little of him. Yeah. And then he's also helping, and he's there helping Mark Antony accept bribes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like he was free. He didn't have to stay. But it's like we just expect him as a character to be there.
Yeah.
That being said, he does have a very, very important thing to do in the second to last episode, I think, where he is the one who brings it to light that Antony has basically neglected his wife and family in Rome and plans to cede everything to Cleopatra and her children, which is the final break that leads to civil war between Octavian and Antony, which is kind of, I mean, what really happened is Octavian broke into the Vestal Virgins and read Antony's will, which he shouldn't have been able to do, but revealed then that Antony was planning on ceding over Rome to Cleopatra's children.
Yep. Whether or not that was true, right? Like, I don't know. I could totally see that being a plant.
Yeah. And I didn't quite get Pasca's motivation for that.
I think he's just like, Antony's crazy. I need to get out of here because like...
Yeah, but like you don't have to give the will to Octavian.
I mean, how else? Trying to
how do you secure your future?
His escape otherwise.
I guess like if there'd been maybe a reward, like how Titus Fill is like, oh, I didn't know there was a reward for that, but I'll take it for killing Caesarion. He's like, oh yeah, I'll take that if you're offering. Yeah, I think that moment's really interesting. And the other thing too, because as we were watching Attia and Octavia, it's like I'm really interested. It's like, what were their lives like? Because we definitely had plenty of rich women who's like has some outrageous lifestyles and everything like that. Just a quick Wikipedia is like, no, they were like perfect Roman women, and like we barely have any information about them. It's like they were the most pious and all of that. And I really loved that the show played with that. They're like, well, actually, no. And we see that Octavian as the mastermind of things. You would definitely believe that he's like trying to make his family look perfect on the outside. And so locking them into their own villa for years. Do years pass by? It feels like it sometimes, but I can't tell.
Unclear. Yeah.
Because no one's aging.
We know at least we have some hard dates, right? Yeah. So, all right. So we've got the Battle of Philippi. That happens in 42. Actium's not for like another decade or so.
31 is Actium. Yeah.
Yeah. This season spans and Caesar's killed in 44, right? So this season spans almost 13 years of time.
Which is wild. Because I feel like even though that like the first season condensed a lot of time, I think it was like 5 to 8 years, maybe. It's like maybe 5 at the most, the amount of time that the first season condensed. But 13 years in like the last 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot.
Well, so I guess like my question I will put to you is, right, say you do get the orders from on high, right? Season 1's in the can, season 2's in pre-production. You find out that this is going to be your last season, right? This is bad criticism because we should critique the show we have, not the show we want. But for the sake of hypothetical, right? Like, what would you like? Would you just call it early? And if so, where?
It's really hard. Like, I will say for what they did, and I've seen other shows that were rush jobs. It's like they succeeded, at least in the very ending. It's satisfying enough to be complete, especially because what is it called? De Patria Vostro. Like, so about your father.
Yeah.
That was a pretty solid ending. That and like Attia's final line was one of my favorites. Better women than you have tried, and look where they are now.
I want to talk about that scene later.
Yeah, we'll come back to that for sure. So for me, I think I appreciate that like the creators really tried to give a satisfying end to the story with what they had planned to cover. I don't know how successful it was getting there, but the ending was satisfying. And then that makes me sad because maybe if it was a little less satisfying, like maybe if it had been a little bit more of a cliffhanger, HBO might have been more willing to come back to it and do something with it.
There were rumors for a while of a movie. I don't know what that movie would have been. I don't know how credible those talks were, but yeah.
And now that Ray Stevenson's dead, everyone's like, nope, if there's no Titus Polo, I don't want it.
Talk of the movie, I think, was like that ended maybe a decade ago at least, but
well, like Deadwood got a movie, and I feel like that was one of those things that was like, well, where's Rome's movie?
Yeah. Firefly,
like I said, I want the prequel now. I want Sulla. I want Cicero. I want that.
Oh, that would be great.
Catiline. Right? Yeah, and I mean, I think the reason on paper is the show was prohibitively expensive to make and create.
And Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
Like, come on, guys.
Which, I mean, suffered a similar fate, right? Where like it had a lot more runway to do it on, but when it gets to season 6, 7, and 8, that show really like ramps up the pace in a way that it feels like it's careening towards the end.
Yeah.
I did read a funny little blurb about like why some of the costs were so high because of that really cool studio in Rome, but then you had to deal with Italians, and one guy was like, so like you needed a ton of scaffolding to like these giant sets in the Forum and everything. But it's like the Italians will tell you, it's like, well, you can't buy scaffolding, but you can rent some from my brother. And you're like, yep, that makes sense. That checks out.
That checks out.
So I
don't know.
That might have been part of the problem.
Yeah, I do kind of wish that they had maybe like gone along with their original plan for the season, done, I guess, maybe 12 episodes and ended at Philippi, because I feel like the first episode especially, I think is so good. And I'm like, if they kept going at that pace, I think it would have been like a spectacular season.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of the same mind.
Battle of Philippi, but then the scene between Servilia and Attia.
Yes.
Attia the Julie.
Are we friends? They like clutch their hands. Ugh.
No, I demand justice.
Oh, that one where she.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Mark Antony just end the season was like, now that's an exit. End of season. You're like, wait.
Yeah. That would have been a dramatic note to end on.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's a really good scene. Like her chanting got stuck in my head for a while. Like I can still hear it. Oh, that's another great scene. Yeah, where would you end it, Colin?
I think I'm with Eli. I think I would end it with Philippi, and and then we could just have what could have been. The best season of Rome would be the one that never got made, like Star Wars films.
Yep.
So cutting back into the plot. So then we have the Battle of Mutina, right, where Antony kind of goes a little rogue. Octavian, who has sort of positioned himself, he's been off in Campania, raising an army and getting allies that we'll meet later. And then we get the big reveal at the end of the battle of the new Octavian. So.
Yep. This is also after the major beating that Mark Antony gives them for giving away all of their money.
Yes. Right. Like the wedge that gets driven between Octavian and Antony really kind of comes down to not only the he's stooping his mom, but then Antony basically beats him for giving away all his money. And importantly, Attia takes Antony's side generally.
Yep. I love that scene, though. I feel like it's done so well. And you can still see that line of like Octavian being really, really smart. Like he makes the right decision. He makes friends. He like gathers all of Caesar's supporters because he's his heir. He used his money the way that he stipulated in the will. He does all the right things. And then it's still awful.
Yeah. There's a whole reading of this kind of, and in particular, I think when you have Max Purkis, the first, young Octavian, and there's a whole reading of just these two characters through like masculinity, where Antony is a type of masculinity of like aggressive and lustful and virile and action based, right? Very impetuous. And he, lords that over Octavian, who is very much not like, he physically kind of dominates Octavian and imposes upon him. And then the stooping his mom is part of that. But then Octavian consistently kind of like emasculates and embarrasses Antony by Antony ends up doing what this little brat is telling him to do, and which is why Antony is so right, flies off the handle at that when the kid is right, when he's getting outmaneuvered by a teenager, when he's getting kind of shown up by a kid, when people start taking the kid's side over him. And so he feels Anthony is not just like politically threatened, his like masculinity is threatened by this kid. Yeah. So, which is what I really liked about the Max Purkis performance, right? Because he has that teenage vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I think that it's also like, to me, Mark Antony didn't seem a charming character because he's such a womanizer in this show. But then you get to Egypt and he talks about, it's like, the people still love me. I think the one moment I saw is like when they were in the battle at Philippi together and they're sitting on their horses. They're like, what's happening? And Mark Antony's like, the best way to find out. Charge.
Yeah.
And I like that did sum it up in a lot of ways versus I really loved that moment when Octavian and Cleopatra meet and he's like, oh no, you'll be safe. You can come with me with your children. And they have that conversation. It's like, I was like super charming. It's like, and that's when you're most disheartening because he can't pull off the charm in that way.
Yeah.
But there's something else about him.
The big reveal right after Mutiny is been a recasting, or not a recasting, a new performance, right? An age up for Octavian. He's now going to be played by Simon Woods.
Mr. Bingley.
Mr. Bingley.
Yeah. So here's my kind of first thought is, maybe part of my resistance to season 2 is I liked Max Purkis's Octavian, and I am less enthused by Simon Wood's Octavian. Possibly more having to do with the writing of the performance, but we can get into that.
So yeah, I don't usually like an age up, especially I feel like Octavian was supposed to be 19, right? So he's supposed to be this twerpy teenager, and I agree, I liked Max Perkins as that twerpy teenager. Has that vulnerability, like you said. But I also don't hate the like weird calculating roboticness that Simon Wood brings to it.
A professor of mine once described it as reptilian, which I've never been able to unhear and like unsee.
Yeah. He's much more unsettling, as even in appearance. Like it's a lot of it's the super light blue eyes and just how that guy does not smile. What is it? Livia was like, when's the last time you think I told a joke? And Livia's like, last week you said something about fish. But it's like, none of us can picture what that moment would have looked like.
Yeah.
Because he's just unsettling and like, I'm thinking to like the moment where he is pretty cute. Longer hair helps in Pride and Prejudice, but he smiles, and that's just completely absent.
Yeah, and I think like the cinematography works in his favor on that as well. Because like I feel like when you're saying about his eyes, I feel like a lot of times they have like light coming like right through the side of his eye. He looks like that weird robotic reptilian. Again, I can't unhear that.
Yeah, there's no emotion. There's no, it's all pure logic and calculation. And again, I sort of struggle sometimes with the guy who becomes emperor, right? The way we explain is that like, oh, he was a robot man.
I mean, it gives the sense of naivete. Like I liked that there are moments where he's not sure what to do. He knows there's no path forward or something like that. He played Cicero so well and be like, of course, like, you should make me consul, and of course I will listen to your sage advice.
Yeah. And Cicero banking is like, he's a 19-year-old kid, like we can keep him in line, right? And everybody underestimates Octavian until he's the undisputed master of Rome. Yeah.
Until he has a legion in the Senate House, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, esteemed senators. Just that like that speech is so good.
I like a lot of the speeches. Is like, which speech should I give to the soldiers? The money one. And I'm like, the money one? And then he says the speech and I'm like, the money one.
That's the money one.
he reminds me of the like a Deadly Serious version of the Parks and Rec joke where they work for that senator when he's not giving stump speeches and like delivering, he just like sits in his office and like stares at the wall.
He just like can turn it on and off automatically. Yeah. Terrifying.
Yeah.
Do you think they tried to like make him seem more standoffish as a result of basically the falling out with his mother?
I think so, because that's like such a big thing when he first talks to Octavia again, right? Like they automatically come back to that moment, and he seems really hung up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing that I feel like you don't let go of.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a traumatic experience, a core memory, and yeah, I feel like it does, or it is supposed to shape who he is going forward. Yeah.
Oh my God. As I'm reading through my notes, like there's whole subplots that I totally forgot about. Like even I only watched it last week, like the whole thing with the assassin in the kitchen.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the whole thing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
That felt like a character that should have been more than one episode, but he is literally one episode.
And the thing that I can't get over about the whole assassination attempt is the assassination attempt falls through because the cook, as she's bringing the soup out to serve, sticks her finger in the soup and eats it. And I'm like, who does that? Like, I understand taking a sip while you're preparing it in the kitchen or like, munching on the ingredients while you're cooking. Like, I am very guilty of that. But like, who literally dips their finger in food as they're bringing it out to serve? Man.
Yeah. Okay. This is how I would have played it. Instead, she trips and it slightly spills over the edge. So she wipes it clean with just wipes the drip off with her hand and then licks it. See?
Or she just takes a sip before she leaves the kitchen.
Something.
Because they do set up that she is.
Duro would have seen that.
Yeah.
Duro would have seen that and stopped her because he's the one spooning it in. So.
Because they do set up that she is tasting the food a lot. That is, I think they do plant that. And then, Servilia plants an assassin in Adia's house. That doesn't go anywhere. What else happened?
It adds to the body count, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's true.
We get the introduction of Octavia's friend Jocasta, who introduces her to weed.
I thought it was opium.
It's hemp, right? They say that they're smoking hemp, I think. Yeah.
Oh, they do say hemp? Okay. But there was some opium at some point.
Cleopatra, I think, was on opium.
Okay.
Which brings me back to Elijah. I know this is the weird research thing, but our skeleton with the weird notch in the teeth is like, okay, they're using pipes on Rome. I need to know who they're talking to and get some schematics of what those things look like. Because, people were getting high and in the past, especially dealing with pain or the fact that you're in exile or...
Yeah. No, I feel like the same reasons that people would smoke anything today are true of the past as well, right? And we have the teeth marks to prove it.
Yeah, so but man, Atia sure escalates it after that, right? Because the torture of Duro already pretty bad. Although, doesn't she just sweet talk him for a moment too and be like,
because she has Timon torture him for a little bit. Then she basically goes and secures the information that she already knew, that it was Servilia. Then they kidnap Servilia.
They kidnap Servilia, and then Atia wants Timon to kill her, but that's the kind of the point, because also subplot, Timon's brother, a true Druish man from Judea, has shown up.
Right. Well, so Timon, which I feel like they were starting to plant the seeds in season 1 of Timon's crisis of faith, right? Because his whole thing is he's in love with Adia and is her dirty henchman who does all the dirty work for her and goes too far. And then simultaneously, his brother comes back to town, and his brother is some kind of religious radical revolutionary from Jerusalem and reinstills a religious vigor in Timon that culminates in them attempting to assassinate Herod when he's visiting Rome. Yeah. Which culminates in Timon just killing his brother instead and then leaving the show.
Which, it's like, this feels like a 2-season arc that wrapped up in 4 episodes. And I almost wish it just wasn't there. Because I'm like, if it's not going to go anywhere, if it's not actually going to mean something, why are we doing it? Why is it?
This feels very much like it's a holdover, or it's stuff from the sort of promised season 5 that was going to be dealing with Palestine. Because stuff is actually while this is all happening, stuff is happening with
Herod.
With Herod, who's like a Roman client king. There's a lot of politics happening there that does tie back into what's going on with Cleopatra. This is, I guess, my question, because we're going to talk about this when we get to I, Claudius, especially, of just the irresistible urge for shows about Rome to jump over to be like, what's going on in Judea?
To have a come to Jesus moment, if you will.
Right.
I don't care for it. I feel like we don't have to have it. It doesn't feel necessary at this point, especially if they knew that it was going to go nowhere.
Yeah, it's one of the things, like, because the audience knows that important stuff is about to happen in the Holy Land in the next couple of decades, that we have a sort of undue amount of attention focused on what's happening in that part of the world, where, like, Judea is one of many provinces and client kingdoms that have stuff going on and things they're dealing and negotiating with and operating with Rome. My frustration is it only gets the kind of importance and weight. It gets a disproportionate amount of importance and weight because we have this backwards sort of looking way of history. We're looking backwards through history.
Yeah.
You know, nobody cares about what's going on in Bithynia or Mauritania or like what the drama with King Juba.
Yeah. I think there was one
or
mention of
the Scythians.
Yeah. There was like one mention of the Seleucids and
which there's a lot of irons in the fire in the Roman world at this time, which is why they have these
when did the Passion of Christ come out?
2006, something like that. I will tell you.
I wonder
that would have been.
I wonder if that has something to do with
2004. You're right. No, it predates, which even that I think supports your thesis. I think you're getting at.
Yeah, we want to think historically. It's like there's so many other things going on, but it's like, but then we come back to the American audience and how are you going to justify these big budgets for the show? What might be something that could save it? I think that's why it's like everything hints and leads to, it's like, if this does continue, we're going to Judea. We're going to deal with Herod and
Jesus.
Like, you want it?
After watching all of this content media for Rome, there's really there's 4 places in the Roman world, according to cinema and television. That is Rome, Britain, Egypt, and Judea.
Yep.
And those 4 places, I feel like, occupy 90% of all content that gets made about the ancient world, and Greece to a lesser. I mean, if we're just talking about Rome.
Right. We talked about like the stupid thing about horrible histories is like there's barely any films about Boudica.
There's one coming out. I saw the trailer. Does not look good.
Well,
the woman who plays the huntress lady in Centurion, Olga Koryl.
I can picture her. The one who can smell blood.
Yeah, she plays Boudica.
Okay.
Is it a English language movie?
Yes, it's an English language film.
Because I was just
Olga Kurylenko. She's French Ukrainian.
Yeah, because if you just think about it, it's like Rome is a BBC and HBO. You would think Britain surely wants to tell their own history in this time period with their own. Nope.
Yeah, we'll see this again with I, Claudius, where, I mean, I, Claudius, it does spends a lot of time talking about what's happening in Britain and what's happening in Judea. But yeah, so that's kind of my frustration with the time and plot is it feels only in there to have this plug for a place that audiences recognize. You know, it's a part of the show that I feel like you could almost totally excise.
Yeah.
And it would have little impact on the story.
Yeah, I think it does give me the sense, though, like there was some hope that at the end of the day, it's like they didn't want to close the door entirely, the book, whatever. They didn't want to close it entirely. They wanted to leave enough there. Like, for instance, Varanus. Okay, spoiler alert for all of you people like me who had not seen it up to this point. Varanus supposedly dies at the end. But like, what's the general rule for like a lot of these shows is like if you don't see the actual death on screen,
see it on screen, doesn't count.
Does not happen.
The guy lived. The guy made he survived for a month with like a sword wound. So
yeah,
right. I mean, in the ancient world, I feel like you're good. You're fine.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, look, if he can make it all the way back to Rome over the course of a month and still be alive, like, shouldn't he have pulled
especially
through?
on a ship? Like they had to take a ship. If it was going to
happen,
right?
It would have happened by then.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I'm a academic,
well,
but.
I think the interesting thing that they did start to do towards like the mid part of the season was like, I mean, that was what was kind of fun was that Varanus and Pulo are like best buds. Like they have one falling out, but they are buds for life. Like the women in their lives die, but like they're there for each other.
Oh my God. Varanus and Jurta, this is my daughter. She has been sold into slavery and prostituted. You will treat her well. Like, Jesus.
You will treat her with kindness.
Yes.
And this is my son from my wife with another man. Oh my God.
Can you imagine if your boss came in one day and gave that speech to you and was like, oh, whoa.
Oh dear.
Too much information.
Yeah. Damn, dude.
What I liked was, so they have that friendship, and then they're both best friends with Mark Antony and Octavian, which is a really awkward position to be in for them half the time. Yeah. Although that's what never messes up their relationship, ever.
Yeah. No, they're never questioned. They're on two sides of a war, but it's like they are never questioned about their relationship.
I wonder, because I had this thought where, like, at what point, so we've seen now over the course of 22-ish episodes, right? Varanus and Polo are basically front seat to kind of everything. And at what point does this kind of bleed into like Forrest Gump territory where like I can imagine a sort of hypothetical season 5 where like they're there at the crucifixion or something like that.
Oh, why wouldn't they be?
They're like Peabody and Sherman or something where like every stage of history, if you like took a picture and freeze framed, like there they are in the crowd. And like, yeah, like at what point does it turn into like a Forrest Gump effect where like every major thing that happened in the last 50 years, they were there.
Yeah.
And not just there, they affected it.
The thing is like, even though we don't see Varanus die, I feel like they have more or less killed all, like with all the ups and downs and the fact that his man, Mark Antony, is dead by the end of this. Where the hell would you take him at this point? Right.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine like there would be a subplot with time on, and then that house somehow ropes them into whatever's happening. If we get more into Augustus's reign, right, would they go to Germania? I mean, that's too much history because they wouldn't be able to go to Britain. They would be like 100 by that point. But
right,
yeah,
because I can almost see a situation where they go to Britain. They're like, huh, Britain, funny country.
Yeah,
some kind of meta, like, you know, like, aren't the British weird?
Okay, quick history question, because I know that Mark Antony, Octavian, and one dude, Lepidus, they first
Lepidus.
Okay, they formed the first triumvirate, right? Isn't there another triumvirate? They are the second.
They are the second one. First one is Caesar, Crassus, Pompey.
Yeah, we never. Well,
okay, here's a question. What happened to Lepidus? Because he just disappears from the show, much like history. I actually don't know what happened to him in real life.
He literally, I think they just like pay him off and he just like quietly like shuffles into the background. I should double check that, but that's what I remember. But I feel like having watched this show, going into like
Africa.
More serious. Yeah.
Oh wait, are we talking about real Lepidus or show Lepidus?
Both.
Okay.
Pretty much the same. He got Africa and he's like, you know what? Y'all figure it out.
No, because literally I feel like because of this show, that is how I picture Lepidus. Like that is whenever if you read anything about Lepidus, I'm like
there's a meme. The first meme, God, I'm like describing memes on microphone. All right. There's a meme that's like in the opening credits of the Pokemon show. There's like Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur. And Charizard is like breathing fire. Blastoise, the water, starter water type, is shooting water, and Venusaur is just like there. Well, and then somebody's like, "What's Venusaur doing?" And then the top comment is like, "His best." And then someone had a version of it where it's like Mark Antony, Octavian, and then Lepidus, and Lepidus is the Venusaur, and they're like, "What's Lepidus doing?" Like his best. So the answer to Eli, your question, on 22nd of September, 36 BC. Lepidus was stripped of all of his offices except for that of Pontifex Maximus. Octavian then confined him to Circii after the defeat of Antony in 31. Lepidus' son became involved in conspiracy, but that was discovered by Maximus. Younger Lepidus was executed. The foreigner Charmzir was left unmolested. I think he just kind of quietly retires.
Yeah. He just like shuffles off into the corner.
You know what? Maybe that was kind of the play.
Yeah, it was the smart move. All things considered.
I mean, in this world, living to dying of old age is winning.
Absolutely. But yeah, because Octavian says at one point, like, they didn't survive the battle. I did. Therefore, I won. Like, the point of the battle is to survive. I'm still alive. They're not.
Therefore, I am triumphant. Give me a parade.
Yeah. But yeah, Lepidus.
I do really like the scenes where he's talking and you can just tell like everybody in the room's like, Lepidus, no one gives a shit what you think.
Like,
he's going off. He has some babes like, I bet it was galls. Galls are so bad. And everyone's like,
I remember that.
Everyone's like, no, it wasn't galls. It's like,
that was probably one of my favorite scenes with him because like everyone's super pissed off at each other that this has happened. It was like, you know who I think it was? The galls.
He is just like not on the same wavelength as everybody else.
Not at all.
He's just this real fifth wheel, like.
Oh, okay. I have like feels like the two big plot points because we keep skirting around the Battle of Philippi, but that episode was amazing. Yeah. So I want to talk about that one, and then I want to talk about the last episode too of like the relationship between Antony and Cleopatra because I enjoyed both of those immensely. The battle, Brutus. I was like, this is such a good looking realistic battle that's not 90% dark, so I can actually see what's going on.
Taking more shots at Game of Thrones. But
it's hard not to.
The show's also very light on. I mean, the show tends to cut away. Like in season 1, you never see like pretty much any of the battles, and then it's just cuts to the aftermath, and then Caesar won or something like that. This one we do get a little Philippi. Now, I mean, I imagine that was largely a budget constraint because a battle sounds like an insanely expensive thing to.
Yeah. And I was like, well, we're going for broke now, guys. So
yeah, I mean, fair enough. Leave it all on the floor. Because like I think in like Game of Thrones, the season that had the Battle of King's Landing, whatever that season was, something like 2/3 of the whole season's budget just went to like the battle, for all the extras and effect.
Insane.
Like, yeah. No. And that was like not even the biggest battle that show I feel like put to film.
Right. Yeah.
So what have we learned? Even fake war is expensive. So
yes. But I liked Brutus this season. I like him arguing in the tent with the Bithynians, just like clearly trying to rationalize his own lameness and guilt and shame.
Yeah.
But they're ribbing him for stabbing a wounded man.
I know. I don't like Brutus this season. He gets on my nerves. He's like whiny and annoying. And maybe it's just because I know where it ends, like where it's going. And I'm just like, let's hurry up and get there because I'm tired of you whining.
Oh, I don't know. I was like, I like
me.
that Brutus is so whining and annoying.
Okay.
I like that he's kind of so pathetic. And so aware of his own patheticness.
Yes, he is that. That's true.
I forgot to do a throwback to one of my favorite moments in the first episode. Is part of the deal is they're going to hold the funeral for Caesar, and both Mark Antony and Brutus are going to give a speech, and you don't hear the speeches, but you hear the outcome. Well, you get a nice summarization from the bar.
Well, this is one of those things where the weight of these characters, the meta weight, right? Because Shakespeare, like, what do? Do you do Shakespeare again?
No. That's exactly what I was thinking. Was like, it's like everyone had to read Julius Caesar in high school at some point, I'm sure. So no need to actually do the speeches.
Yeah. Brutus is an honorable man, of course, but we should have got like every time we mention Brutus, one of us has to go, and he's
an honorable man. Well, he's an honorable man. Yeah.
Yeah. The whole Antony rallying up the plebs. Yeah, I wanted to know. Yeah, you guys like the not seeing the funeral speeches.
Oh yeah,
I do. Yeah, because I do think that weight of, or I guess the baggage of everything, playing those characters of Shakespeare, of it all. There's no way that it can be, I don't know, it would land weird, I feel like, any way you did it. And I also liked just like the way that they talked about it as people reacting to it in a bar, talking to each other, having opinions. It felt very real of like, oh, this is the important part, right? This is how people actually are receiving these messages. This is what they actually think of them.
Yeah.
So I liked how they did it a lot.
And that was the only example we really had, like I said, of like Mark Antony being charming for an audience, right? Is like Brutus gives a very erudite speech about, I love those, like something about 12 tables. I don't know.
The Republic, the laws.
and then Mark Antony's like, he brings the bloody toga up. I love this man. He kisses it, throws it. It's like, oh, okay. That's Mark Antony knows what he's doing sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's a man of the people, which is Brutus's and Cassius's whole problem. They just don't get the people. They're too in their own patrician world.
Yeah.
So and then we get Brutus's death. which I also kind of like. I kind of like that he tries to go out honorably, but also simultaneously kind of goes out like a chump. But
yeah.
Yep. It's just, it kind of sums up his entire arc, right? It's like he tries to do like the glorious, heroic thing and ends up just tripping at the finish line.
Yeah. I will say it was kind of heart-wrenching where they're looking for the body of Brutus afterwards, and you just see his hand sticking out under the pile with his finger with the ring cut off.
No.
And I'm like, ooh, okay, that hurt more than actually watching him get stabbed.
Yep.
Oh. I also was like, I kind of appreciated the humor of the battle. They're talking about, it's like, oh, it's your birthday today. And he's like, oh, happy birthday. And then it's like, oh, what a birthday, man.
Right. Dies.
It's like, what else are you going to do? Like when you're facing down. And I thought that was interesting too. Like both Brutus and Cicero in the first season, they are like, oh, we're honorably going to die for having gone against Caesar. And then this one is, they're like, I cannot do that again. I cannot go through that all over again. So just gonna give this man some peaches and ask him to be quick about it. I like
Apollo's description. They're like, what was Cicero like? And he's like, nice guy. Not at all stuck up.
I know.
I mean, yeah, we talked about it already with Alexandra, but like, I do kind of feel like Cicero was done a little dirty because we don't really, we never get to see him really shine. He just kind of seems weaselly the whole time, but I guess that brings us to Cleopatra, unless there's anything else that we've skipped over.
I don't think so.
Well, there's one line. I know where I want to end, which is the triumph. But yeah, Cleopatra. So yeah, in my memory, Cleopatra was in like the majority of this season, but she really isn't. She's in very little of it, actually. And it's only at the very tail end where you get, I mean, again, the kind of the baggage of Antony and Cleopatra together, where they just have that scene at the end where she's like, Antony, Cleopatra. And we don't need to fill in their roller coaster relationship.
The actress for playing her was just so good again. And even though like that first scene we see with them together, which I had seen before, I didn't realize. I think I was trying to find clips to show a class about like Cleopatra and Mark Antony's relationship. And like the one of her hunting the deer or the man dressed as a deer. That scene was so chaotic, and it kind of gave you the sense of like how frivolous the relationship was. Like, because all of a sudden they're just together. You just saw Mark Antony, was married to Octavia, but still sleeping with Attia. And then he's forced to leave them behind. And he's like, I will send for you. And then all of a sudden he's like madly, deeply in love with Cleopatra, and they have 2 kids. You're like, okay, some time has passed here, apparently. And it seems like they're not really, she doesn't seem like a politician in that moment. But then later, I really liked the fact that when the emissary came for the deal and Mark Antony proposes a dual combat or whatever, and Octavian asks how was he? And he's like, oh, he was either drunk or high or not so much. And Cleopatra is like, nah, she was stone cold sober.
Yeah.
She knows what she's about.
Towards the end, Anthony has kind of full on lost it. And Cleopatra sort of realizes that everything has kind of gone. And I like her meeting with Octavian, where everything seems fine, and then she's like, "This guy's a monster, and I made a terrible mistake, and I can't trust myself with this man."
Well, yeah, and it's like she can't manipulate him, right? Like she can't negotiate, she can't seduce him. Like she has no avenue to do like what she would usually do. I feel like what she did with Caesar, what she did with Antony, like as that politician trying to protect herself, her people, her children. She's like, I don't have a recourse anymore. Well,
I was just thrown back to the Cleopatra animated movie we did.
Yep.
Because that was the exact same thing, right?
Yeah. But no, I agree. I think Lindsay Marshall was a really, really excellent Cleopatra. I think she did such a good job. Maybe my favorite Cleopatra on screen.
Yeah.
What did I think at the time? My notes get a lot shorter as they get to the later seasons because I was watching them really late at night.
I watched like the first 6 in like one. Yeah, so I saw like up to Philippi all at once, and I'm like, oh boy, that was a lot. And then I watched the other ones a little more staggered. I'm like, oh, this is still a lot.
Yeah, I jumped around, so I think I watched like 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, 10. I think that's how I did it.
So another side note, Octavia hooking up with Agrippa and strongly insinuating that her daughter, who would later go and be mother or like grandmother to like later Julio-Claudian emperors, right? But actually might just be Agrippa. I love that they keep playing with the parentage of some of these, because you have Caesarion and Pulo.
For Caesarion, they should have left that kid in Egypt. I don't know. He sucked.
I love the cart moment where they're trying to get him out, and it's like, this kid's gonna give us away. Like,
the minute this kid opens his mouth, we're done. And the kid blows their cover immediately. Gets Varanus killed
immediately.
Yeah.
Or does he? We don't know.
And he's just walking around the streets of Rome talking about like when he comes to power and how he's going to like enact retribution. And it's like, all right, whatever, man. You're not doing anything.
Yeah, you're not doing shit, bro.
Which is, I don't know, weird place to be, I imagine. But since we started reviewing the show, I have wanted to talk about what I thought was the final scene, but is the almost final scene, which is all of the women of Augustus's life gathering before the triumph. And you get Livia getting into a little spat with Adia about like who gets to go first. Is it the wife? Is it the mother? And Adia kind of hits back with this retort that's like, better women than you have tried to take me down. I see you're trying to take me down. And this part sits very ill at ease with me, but I want to hear what you two think first.
I want to hear Christy, because this is your first time watching it.
Yeah. And I have a very important question is, have you seen I, Claudius?
I have not. So that'll be a first for me as well once we get there.
Okay. That's part of my thesis.
This moment is very interesting because it presents Livia as like she feels like the main support for Octavian now. And like she sees herself in that light. She sees herself as like first. But then we had those really interesting conversations between Atia and Octavia right before that scene of like, I have literally watched you work your whole life towards this moment. And it's like, if you give up, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it seems like in that time when Octavia gave birth and Atia had to deal with the fact that Mark Antony's left her, there's been some kind of reconciliation there. Like she's an actual grandmother and things like that. And that's just kind of it, right? Like all of Atia's efforts were in men like her uncle Julius Caesar, were Mark Antony, and those ultimately failed. And she kind of doubted the ability of her son. Mm-hmm. And she was really sad about the fallout. And she commented, like, she was like, when they were locked up, she's like, how did he learn all this? It was me, wasn't it?
Yep.
And I think so at the end there, I feel like Atia's resigned herself. I think she believes in that curse that Servilia has put upon her, but she's also recognizing that like her son is her and he gets to succeed and be in this power of position because of what he learned from her. She'll never get to claim that for herself, but she can at least claim being first of the other women in his life. And I think because she does think so deeply about like how hard she had to fight to survive against Servilia in particular, and Cleopatra is, I think, who's insinuated in the other one. Mm-hmm. You know, she's gone up against her. She's gone up against the Queen of Egypt, and she's the one still standing. So she's not going to let just some trollop, as she say, step in front of her now. So I liked it. I think it left Atia at the end because you don't know if she's really just going to fade away or if she is going to be like, you know what? No, I did fight for this and I'm going to take it like I've always wanted to. So that's what that moment was for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I also like it for Adia because I think she's this lovable character that we also kind of hate because she's so despicable, but I also am still rooting for her throughout the whole thing. And I like the way you framed it as, you know, her recognizing maybe that Octavian is
a monster of her own creation.
The monster of her own creation and who she should have been behind all along and who maybe she should have had faith in.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like this for Adia. I think, Colin, I'm wondering if you're looking forward to I, Claudius on the Livia side of things, just because we know. So I haven't watched all of I, Claudius, but I have read the book. I've read Robert Grave's book, I, Claudius, and Livia is like a very particular character that I feel like has baggage like Mark Antony or like Caesar would have. and like throwing her in here at the end feels like it's maybe like needling something that once again like we're not going to get any payoff for. And so I don't know. It's I don't know what it's doing there. So I like this for Adia. I don't know about Livia.
Yeah. So my kind of initial reaction, like kind of Chrissy, you're sort of getting at, is like kind of in its own universe, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense because Adia has been very passive this whole season in particular, where in season 1, she is actively shaping political events, getting Julius Caesar to go here or getting Mark Antony to go there, although inadvertently on that one, but like creating these, securing these divorces and these alliances and marrying people. Like she's a very active player. Whereas in season 2, she spends most of it hanging on to Mark Antony, supporting him when he doesn't support her, working to undermine her son, who eventually wins. And then like, I'm not sure if it's necessarily internally true that she has like won in the way she kind of claims. So like, I kind of am more inclined to read that scene as more of like a meta, the show taking a victory lap for itself that feels a little bit unearned. Whereas like if Adia is kind of the face of the show, right? The thing that like she, of all of the characters, I think most embodies the spirit of this show, or she's the character that most people remember or most people think of. That she's kind of like, if there was a mascot for the show, it would be her. And I can't help but read it a little bit metatextually of being like the show kind of trying to dunk on I, Claudius a little bit. And then the other part, because also like that whole setup, like the way that room is set up, where they're all standing around this like big square room, and there's like a door with like a white light, and you hear a cheering crowd. That is like 100% a set for my Claudius. Lots of scenes in my Claudius where they're standing in a room, and there's a big doorway with white light and a cheering crowd, and they're about to go out and address the masses or something like that. You feel I feel primed to think about that show, but then also like it doesn't make sense kind of in the show's internal logic or like in history, because like if you know anything about Livia is going to run circles around Adia in terms of like Livia is going to actively win in sort of all the ways that you could win it be at this game of Rome, which is a pun I should have landed on like 3 hours ago. And
I will say that like one thing that I question about Atia is that I don't know what she has wanted this entire time. It's Octavia who tells us is like, you've been working towards being #1 mom in all of Rome. Is that what she's been working towards?
No, she's trying to get Antony, and then she's instrumental in Antony's downfall, but only because she gets played by Octavian, or Octavian sends her to Antony and Octavia to get rejected by Antony. So Octavian has a pretense of war. That wasn't Adia's idea.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the scene that I mentioned in season 1 of like that moment where she's just broken down crying that I'm all alone. And I think there is a point she realizes it's like, what do I truly want power of which I will never really get to possess for myself? Or do I just want someone that actually cares about me?
Yeah.
And she thought she had that. So she can give up certain things. Mark Antony is the one who's able to like stop her from killing, was it Servilia or Cleopatra at the party or something like that?
Yeah.
Was it
Servilia?
Yeah.
Servilia.
Like, no, you cannot do this. And she's like, fine. Like, only for him would she give that up, right? Not for her son, but for Mark Antony.
Yeah. I mean, Chrissy, you made a point, like, what does Adia want? And then, it seems like Mark Antony, to love her back. Like,
or maybe she like changes that opinion. Like she thinks she wants this power and this prestige. And like as shit gets scary, like I remember maybe it is just the first episode of season 2 when they're all really scared and she's like, no, Antony wouldn't leave me. Like if he's alive, he would come here. Yeah. And we would leave the city together. So like maybe she changes her mind on what actually feels important to her.
She has the same moment that Mark Antony has in the boat, right? Yep. Glory's nice and all, but life is pretty good. Living is nice.
Yeah. I do like that it kind of segues into the final triumph scene is tinged with sadness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the look isn't there like a final look between Atia and Octavian? Is that right? It seems right.
Yeah, everybody's kind of looking at each other, and then you see there's this tinge of tragedy, I guess, for lack of a better word. That's like as Octavian's coming up the sacred way.
Is he Augustus now? Is that
I think that's what that was. That's
yeah.
he's going to get like a big gold shield and be granted all these titles and get the title Augustus. And that's kind of the, well, I don't know actually what to think about the dawning of the empire. That's a whole larger topic, but which we can unpack when we get to Claudius. But I'm so excited for you guys, for Chris and you to see this. But I really think the show's fantastic. But
okay,
I'm excited to watch all of it because I've only ever seen random episodes, so I'm really excited to watch all of it.
Yes. So I guess we're sort of, as we're wrapping up in our final triumph, right? Any closing thoughts about HBO's Rome?
I'm really sad it took so long to see it. Yeah,
there should be more.
There really should have been more. Although everyone will be aged now, at least, if they ever did decide to do it again.
Right. Yeah.
They would be so old.
I should clarify. I mean, maybe because I was just in a bad mood because I had a very long day. But I like the show a lot more than I think I made it seem this episode. But I do really like the show on the whole. I mean, I guess that's a sign. You don't spend a lot of time thinking of critiques about media you don't care for. So
sure.
Unless you really don't care for it, but then.
No, I've listened to some of our hate episodes and they make me happy for some reason. So,
well, there we go.
Yeah.
So all right. If the movie were to be a thing, or if you were to launch a new pilot episode, right, of Rome, where would you want it to be?
I like Christie's idea of prequel, of going back to Sulla, Marius. We could have young Pompey, young Caesar, young Cicero.
Spartacus.
We could see. We could have Spartacus. I mean, if we're not going to have Jesus, we might as well have Spartacus.
There you
go. He's Jesus for the left.
I'm not wrong. I feel like that's a touchstone of so many different eras of media about Rome. It's either Jesus or Spartacus focused.
I know it would be cool if they did Londinium and Boudica. That could be kind of fun. And then I think Elijah mentioned Dacia.
Yeah.
That was a whole big thing, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, if we're going way far in the future, if we go up to Hadrian, Tiberius types, I mean, that's very, very far in the future from where we are. But they're even pushing the boundaries of Moesia toward that area. Because there's a lot of metal, there's a lot of silver, and there's a lot of mines that get made up there. So yeah, there's drama to be had. There's a lot of trade and travel that way. There's a lot of slaves that come out of that area. So I'm we could go there. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of a graduate school question we got, a grad exam question we got once. That was basically, it was when was the fall of the Republic inevitable? At what point is it this system is doomed for failure? And
I remember this question.
and Augustus is when it ends, really, although it pretends it doesn't end, but that's when it ends and everybody knows it. And so you could say is it with Julius Caesar and the triumvirate? And I think to your points earlier, Sulla is really the beginning of it. Because once Sulla becomes, Sulla is sort of the first guy who really showed that he became a dictator. He ran the show, that a single person with enough of the right kind of support could take over the whole system and overthrow the Republic. And then once he opened that, once he showed it was possible, then Julius Caesar begets Augustus, begets
Empire.
Yeah, I remember teaching in Roman Civs, has the Roman Republic fallen yet? Because it sure seems like it should have at this point.
I also think I would put Marius forward as one of those inevitable pieces, just because he created so much factionalism with the ability to have an entire legion that's loyal to just one person and not to Rome.
To get the enough popular support among the plebs, you can secure extra political powers.
Oh, and if we go back far enough, we could even have some Gracchi brothers running around, and wouldn't that be fun?
And their mother. I want to see their mother in action.
That would be fun, actually. Yeah. I mean, we could argue that with their assassination, it's the legitimization of violence as a political tool, which just sort of kept going. So I don't know.
You should really read Rex. It feels like that's always been a thing of Rome.
Oh yeah.
It's baked right into the founding myth.
Yeah.
So, any closing thoughts or final send-offs we wanna make for HBO Rome? 6 seasons in a movie.
6 seasons.
All in 10 hours.
Cries.
Gosh, yeah. Titus Pillow and Atia forever in my heart now.
All right. Get that tattooed.
Yep.
Don't tempt me.
Christy, do you have any updates that you want to run for?
I fell behind this week. There is a potential upset, but I'm going to leave the voting open a little bit longer. And I usually send prompts, so I'm going to keep it open till tomorrow, and then I'll announce on Friday. But there's a potential upset, you guys.
Don't say that.
So yes, come Friday, we'll be starting off the first matchups in the losers bracket for the worst films. And then we will be deep in, I think we'll be officially in our quarterfinals for the best films. So those are coming around. I did Halloween decorations last weekend, so I got a little behind. It's the first time I'm going to have trick-or-treaters ever. So I had to figure out what to do with my yard. The answer was black cats. Black cats everywhere.
That works. All right, sign off time?
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Esteemed listeners, you can find us on most major streaming platforms as well as movieswedig.com. Please like and review and subscribe. Follow us also on Instagram and Threads at movies_we_dig and on Blue Sky at movieswedig.bsky.social. If you enjoy the show and want to show that enjoyment in a more quid pro quo modus, you can support us on Ko-Fi at Movies We Dig. Thank you again for listening, and we'll be back to dig again when we excavate I, Claudius, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.